Greetings, everyone. Well, this is kind of going to be a reaction video here, and hopefully I can not make this too long. I have about 4 pages worth of text that I've made in my script for expressing my thoughts here. So I've been watching Overlord DVD's last couple of videos about the rumored fight against Kathleen Kennedy to erase the sequel trilogy by using the Veil of the Force, introduced in Star Wars Rebels Season 4. I also watched a few videos before that which highlighted the reported civil war between Kennedy and her group versus Filoni or Favreau, especially regarding her resentment towards The Mandalorian, how she is reported to trying to be making several changes that would lead into her more female-centric series that she wants to make, or Lucas's supposed involvement with Season 3 without her prior knowledge is also supposedly part of that fight. But keeping things, as Overlord DVD says, as keeping it as rumor, as a grain of, taken with a grain of salt. That's a very rough, quick impersonation. I don't entirely agree with his tone, which is fine. It's his opinion, you know, so there's no problem there. But I did want to specifically address kind of my reaction, if you will, to using the idea of the Veil of the Force as a means to erase Kathleen Kennedy's work as an appeasement response to angry fans. That's the angle that I'm taking it at here. Not simply as an interesting plot device, but as sort of a reactionary, we need to appease the fans, we need to fight back against Kathleen Kennedy, kind of the personal, sort of political aspect of it here. So it will get a little political, but at least within the realm of Star Wars. Now, the Veil of the Force, it's a time, realm, space within the Force. It could be called the Unifying Force, I think, to bring maybe a sort of somewhat Legends title to it. It's an intriguing thought as to altering Star Wars history, and and I think it's a very interesting thing. I was really intrigued by all of that. It was introduced in Season 4 of Star Wars Rebels. But you can say I have some real-world reservations or hesitations about resetting the canon, essentially at will. And I've been giving some thought about this, so I don't speak lightly. Please understand that I've thought about this. Now, I remember I was unsure and uneasy about original Legends characters, or the original Legends creation upon the Disney acquisition of Lucasfilm. I had a bad feeling about it, you know. The games, novels, and story arcs and characters which had built up over 3 decades were all wiped away, primarily because there wasn't room to tell any stories with all the expanded universe material in place. Even if the new films would have been taking place after everything that had come before, there would have been so much history and baggage in place that any new story would be virtually unapproachable by newcomers. Just too much baggage, stuff they don't know about. It would have been unapproachable by newcomers, outsiders, or casual fans who had only seen the first 6 episodes. And they would say, "Where's Chewie?" You know. So I understood it at the time of doing the Legends canon, even though I felt apprehension about it. But I'd hoped that having J.J. Abrams, who had been making successful films, and Marvel having had success with the burgeoning MCU since Disney bought Marvel, all those successes, I thought that Star Wars would enjoy a new life, and with a new cohesive storyline spanning film, television, etc. Now, I kept myself away from Star Wars news as much as possible to keep unspoiled for new movies. I personally enjoyed the new Kennedy trilogy. I went back multiple times to watch the various episodes, went back to theaters, as well as the anthology films. I watched them more than once in the theaters. Now, I've already made a video describing my honest, positive reactions to the Disney Star Wars up through The Last Jedi at the time I made that video. I hope you'll watch that. There is also engaging discussion in the comments section as well that I enjoy participating as well, and I hope that you'll read that. But I have come to understand why others don't like the sequel trilogy and why they say it's all wrong. It's kind of some behind-the-scenes aspect of it, as well as the actual story of it. Now, Star Wars Theory and Overlord DVD, and others, I'm sure, maybe Tyrone Magnus and such like that, they've reported on the hoodwinking of George Lucas into selling Star Wars under false pretenses of using his original sequel story treatments. Not a great premise for establishing new canon, I know. It's also been reported that George was very disappointed and hurt after seeing episodes 7 and 8. Even his efforts to supposedly re-edit The Rise of Skywalker were discarded in favor of Kennedy's plan for Star Wars. But understand that behind-the-scenes drama like this it exists all over Hollywood. I think of Back to the Future 2, where Crispin Glover, who played McFly, Marty's dad, George McFly, he took legal action in regard to, because he didn't like how his character was being treated, so he didn't want to come back to the Future 2. So they hired someone as a look-alike stand-in under heavy prosthetic and obscured behind the back, whatever, to keep his character going in Crispin Glover's likeness. I think Crispin Glover is the right name. To keep George McFly's likeness without his permission. And so then he took a legal battle about it. I think that Wizard of Oz had troubled production. Like there was issues with actors and stuff like that, and makeup and whatever, and stuff like that happened to the Tin Man and things like that. There are other troubled productions in Hollywood, but some of these still led to well-loved movies. Now I'm not saying that it's all right. I'm not explaining it away as saying get over it. No, but understand that behind-the-scenes drama and the creative struggle against personalities, it's no new thing. So having it in Star Wars is, it happens in other stuff, so it can't happen to Star Wars as well. Now, speaking also of George has an incredible imagination, and I think perhaps it's too incredible for some. It's almost like Beethoven, I'm not writing for today's people, I'm writing for the future, is what it's said about some of his later compositions in the more romantic time period of music. Now, the new trilogy would have been very different under following George's treatment, and I've heard that it might have had to deal with some microscopic aspect of the Force, microscopic life, or some sort of thing like that with the Force, and something that sounds really very strange. Now, some people didn't like the prequels because of midichlorians, Jar Jar, of young Anakin, etc. So, knowing that people reacted badly against the prequels makes me think that I don't know how people will have enjoyed the Lucas sequels. People can't logically predict that they would have loved a Lucas sequel trilogy just because they hate the Kennedy sequel trilogy, what we have now. It reminds me of the ancient Israelites in the Bible said, if only we had stayed in Egypt, forgetting the fact that they've been slaves for, about 400 years. So, because they were complaining about not having food, not having water, being out in the desert, all that kind of stuff. They were complainers, And so, if only is really a pointless and regrettable argument, a debate which never moves people forward. It only breeds resentment. Now, my guess is that most kids don't even probably care much about the difference in the tone of Star Wars between the original to prequel to sequel. They don't probably really care about that sort of thing. They take Star Wars at face value. It's the grown-ups who take issue with their childhood, and this is where I get a little cynical. It's the grown-ups, it seems, who take issue with their childhood and assumed sense of identity being destroyed, meaning that they set their identity in Star Wars, in fiction and fantasy. And indeed, the Star Wars is not just for kids. Using that as a platform to make your argument doesn't hold up well when you state that you're trying to relive your childlike pleasure you gained from it. That's one of the arguments that I heard Overlord DVD make in one of the videos. Now, let's consider what happened in the when the expanded trilogy or expanded universe came out, or when it happened in 1999. A big thing happened in 1999. The expanded universe was, up to that point, with the books that had been read, it felt like a safe universe where nothing really bad happened because everybody survived. So there wasn't really a whole lot of new things that happen, except stuff happened. Maybe there's some new characters, people got born, but the main characters, nothing happened to them. It was kind of safe, so it kind of made it not compelling drama for some. But then Star Wars universe was shaken to its core, and it was at the approval of George Lucas too. But it was not universally accepted. Now this is from Wikipedia in regards to the New Jedi Order. Timothy Zahn felt that the deaths, here I quote, Timothy Zahn felt the deaths of major characters in the New Jedi Order and subsequent Star Wars book series strayed from the feel of Star Wars. Randy Stradley alleged that Del Rey book publishers used an invasion idea originating with Dark Horse publishers, and it took that idea in directions they did not intend. Which, again, kind of sounds like what happened with Lucas's idea, and it didn't happen according to what his ideas were. Michael A. Stackpole, just after the publication of his New Jedi Order Dark Tide books, when he was asked about his new Battletech books, if what it would involve, he responded, "An alien invasion? 1,000 times no." However, John Ostrander read and enjoyed the series. In an interview published in the New Jedi Order, The Unifying Force, Shelley Shapiro, the editorial director of Del Rey, expressed some regret over the grimmer aspects of the series, New Jedi Order series, and the Yuuzhan Vong themselves, as well as the timing of the novel, The New Jedi Order Star by Star, coming so soon after the September 11th attacks. Yeah, so story developments that happened and creative choices that happened, caused shockwaves, and it was kind of a big deal to the Star Wars fandom. So this isn't the first time that Star Wars was quote-unquote taken away from its roots. Let's look at the characters in the expanded universe. I mean, this is one of the big things, is the legacy characters, Han and Luke and stuff like that, were taken and trashed. But let's look at what happened in the expanded universe for contrast. Han had little significant character development up to 1999, according to some, and that was up before the book Vector Prime. Now, in Vector Prime, Chewie dies, saving Han's youngest child. Han blamed his son, whose name was Anakin, for Chewie's death, just like Luke felt threatened by Ben Solo's seduction to the dark side. Han ran away from his wife and family to have misadventures with other characters. Scott, I don't know his last name, but Scott from the Force.net book review of Onslaught at that time said, Han is a shadow of his former self. The story takes place 2 months after the death of Chewbacca. While his wife, children, in-laws, and friends are out almost being slaughtered, Han's back on Coruscant, drowning in alcohol, feeling sorry for himself. I always thought that Han Solo would have been out getting revenge for the death of his friend, or at least protecting his family. End quote. So that is a review from the Force.net about Han's character. Now, but Han eventually comes back to the fight in the series. Now, for The Force Awakens, Han was essentially rewritten. That arc was rewritten and condensed into the confines of a 2-hour movie, with Han having similar tendencies. We had to deal with it in our own way. Both Han and Leia retreated to their prior life before meeting each other, scoundrel and politician. So, again, they're kind of running away from their family friend problem. Now, also in The Force Awakens, Han's death was like Obi-Wan's death in A New Hope, and even Qui-Gon's death in Phantom Menace. The elder character from a prior era meeting their end. It seemed pointless when you think it could have been avoided. You know, I mean, think about what Obi-Wan could have done in the rebellion had he chose to stay alive. Who knows? But their deaths were helpful in aiding those still living. Qui-Gon had taught Yoda and Obi-Wan about becoming Force ghosts. Obi-Wan pointed Luke to Yoda after his death, and then Han showed Ben forgiveness and love, which helped him to repent. So their deaths seemed pointless at the time, but it served a purpose later on, even if you just consider it retconning. Now, Legends Luke, okay? Legends Luke had his faults too. Luke chose to follow Clone Palpatine to the dark side, even after he said, "Never, I'll never turn to the dark side." So in the Dark Empire comics, Luke was foolishly thinking that he could beat the dark side from within the dark side. And did anybody complain afterward about Anakin not seeming to fulfill the prophecy in Revenge of the Sith when it came out in light of the Dark Empire comics? Anakin's supposed to bring balance to the Force, and Palpatine comes back as a clone. So did he not restore the balance? What's going on here? Which is a similar case about, Palpatine coming back in Rise of Skywalker. Did Anakin not fulfill the Force? That was a question. Now, Legends Luke had also, separate thing, had a long, protracted, and awkward relationship with Mara Jade even before getting married. And there were other painful romances which were a significant distraction. Callista, making Luke a helpless and insecure romantic for several years of novels. Luke had the same hubris as described in the Last Jedi to think he could train dangerously powerful prodigies, Kip Duron or Disan, students who went to create an army of reborn Force-sensitive acolytes, or students who nuked an entire star system, or helped to resurrect Exar Kun, Dark Lord of the Sith. Luke was also paralyzed, this is another point, Luke was also paralyzed by pacifism early in the Yuuzhan Vong era, even considering that the Jedi Order were at fault for not being able to sense them through the Force, or that something was wrong with the Force itself. So the expanded universe isn't terribly different from the Kathleen Kennedy sequel trilogy as far as dealing with some legacy characters. Now, one thing that I enjoyed in the sequel trilogy is that the Force itself takes a more active role in events, as mysterious as these actions were, which manifests especially in the character of Rey. Now, would people have complained if Rey were male? Does it matter to them that now that she's of Sith ancestry to explain her raw talent? Now, Rey and Ben are a dyad in the Force, which is a pairing unlike anything we've ever seen before. The will of the Force responds as nature does by fashioning Rey to be the restorative answer to Palpatine's meddling through Snoke corrupting Ben Solo, much like Anakin was the Force's response to Plagueis and Sidious's unnatural midi-chlorian experiments. Now, I take Star Wars, personally, more seriously than anybody I know. But I'm open to organic changes that, don't keep fitting in the same mold or telling already told stories. Now, I know that The Force Awakens borrows really heavily from A New Hope. I do understand that. But The Last Jedi didn't. So, within the context of Star Wars, I accept that the Force can act in new ways that still keep within its nature. I see it as parallel to my own faith that God doesn't always act as you expect, and that he sometimes does things deliberately against the accepted common human wisdom. Now, understand, I'm certainly not comparing Kathleen Kennedy to God, but this is simply an illustration that things are more than they appear, and sometimes the play out of events takes time. So it kind of requires patience in things to not be disappointed with them right away, but to allow that something will come of it. Now, as far as female heroes go, or heroes of different ethnic backgrounds, I don't care that Kathleen Kennedy has championed female heroes. I don't care what skin color the lead has, or what ethnicity they are. I would suggest that sexual orientation is a subject more suitable for Star Trek than Star Wars, although that's my unpopular opinion. That's the blink and you miss it kiss at the end of Rise of Skywalker. Remember that Han Solo was at one point supposed to look something like Greedo, green-skinned with gills, and Luke was supposed to be a 60-year-old general, or even someone the size of Kenny Baker. That was a possibility in George's mind. Now, I know that the reaction to this... Wait, hang on. I'm losing my spot here. Okay. Now, to me, a hero is a hero. Heroes don't have agendas except to save the day, rescue the perishing, and fight for truth. Now, I know the reaction to this thought is that behind the scenes, Kennedy is pushing feminism and identity politics into Star Wars. I understand that, but let me address it later. Stay with me. Consider that Ahsoka, a female character, is beloved, and she was hated at first. I know that there's some reaction to Dave Filoni talking about that in some sort of women's conference. Now, Rey, granted, hasn't had the benefit of 7 seasons of television to build good standing and character development that Ahsoka has had. I understand that. That's an unfortunate symptom of movie making. You just don't have a lot of time to do that sort of thing. Not without having all sorts of extra movie, extra silver screen material that adds into it, apocrypha, if you will. But the casual fan isn't going to go along with that. You know, they're not going to read books just so that way they can watch a movie. They want the movie to be self-contained in itself. Now, what I mean by... So let me say again. So Ahsoka was beloved, but she was hated at first. And Rey didn't have the benefit of character development, which is why she sort of becomes powerful really quick. You know, a Mary Sue. That's what everybody hates Rey as, is being a Mary Sue. Or those who do hate him because of that. Now, understand that no one should legitimately stand up to any villain that is a threat to someone on Luke's level without having some sort of in or something that gives them a shortcut to power. Not within the span of a trilogy, you know, or particularly a 2-hour movie, which really was more like a 4-hour movie because episodes 7 and 8 were right back to back with each other. That was something that was also different compared to the other series. That alters the storytelling. So they need some sort of in or a shortcut to power in order to really have any sort of standing on Luke's level, or any villain at Luke's level. So, I mean, really, what threat can truly come against a mature and powerful Luke nearly 40 years after A New Hope? You have to remove Luke. I mean, Luke should have been able to take care of any problem legitimately, and then you don't have a story. So that means that you have to remove Luke from the equation somehow to make any sort of story or conflict play out. But what would even be powerful enough to take care of Luke in that sense? Nobody could stand up to that. The galaxy would be doomed if Luke were taken out by force. So this, in order to have any sort of conflict or story play out, that's what has to happen. And that's no easy task, understand? And I don't envy Abrams and Kasdan the task of trying to set that up. I don't believe Luke ever really stood a chance against Vader in Return of the Jedi, frankly. There had to be something giving Luke an in to make that work. Vader was in complete control in Empire Strikes Back. Now, in Return of the Jedi, it wasn't just Vader against any Jedi. It was something much more. It was an emotional struggle, an internal fight for Anakin to triumph over Vader. That's why that fight is not so strong, but it's emotionally connected. Now, going back to this idea of the veil of the Force, I think it's a neat idea to make a new aspect of the Force. I thought it was really intriguing. Again, the idea of the unifying Force. But being used to create alternate timelines, especially for the purpose of appeasement, sounds like knocking down statues to me. Alternate timelines were a Star Trek thing, or a Marvel thing. Now Star Wars may become less unique from other franchises, like a comic book multiverse, and it's not even out of a place of creativity. Or at least if the idea of using it to reset the Kennedy trilogy or erase the Kennedy trilogy is true. That's the aspect I'm coming out from here. If that's the case, then using the veil of the Force, this unifying force, to erase it, is not out of a unique plot device, but it's being used out of
the fear of an angry mob. It's not out of creativity. Therefore, an alternate timeline setup would simply be used as an escape for whenever the self-proclaimed entitled feel aggrieved. Even if they have, real world, even if there are actual things that you could take serious issue with. Like the whole, mistreatment of George Lucas. Now understand that with this device, thinking that this is a panacea, maybe Rey may even jump ship into the Prime Universe, if there is one made, and then you're still not going to have gotten rid of what you hate. Kind of like how every manufactured crisis since 2016 hasn't gotten rid of Donald Trump. Kathleen Kennedy may be more hated by the angry Star Wars fandom than Donald Trump is hated by liberals. Folks like Overlord DVD sound like the scene in Cars 2 where Sir Miles Axelrod is reciting the Lemon's grievances against the world. I mean, he has the right voice for it too. It just sounds like it. Overlord DVD expresses that old guard fans who don't go along with Kennedy's canon are declared phobes or ists, I think is what he said. They have been insulted. We've been insulted long enough. I mean, as if you have ownership of Star Wars. Fans don't own Star Wars, so they fight like it's theirs to have. Now, it seems like this style of playing out the villain voice of revenge it's just kind of his style. After watching a few videos, that just seems what it is. So, and I get that he's kind of maybe playing it out that way, being the voice of the villain. But there's still definite malice and resentment in the position that he represents. It's not just him, it's those whom he represents. Now, having said that, I must say I do groan with our ever-politicized environment, especially within these last 4 months since this new year. People say, can we hit the reset button on 2020? I get it. I do. Really, I do. Now, so I groan with our ever-politicized environment when what's on the surface is not even the real issue. Right? There's bigger things going on. I get it. I definitely get it, and I understand this anger about changing Star Wars from its roots simply for the sake of political appeasement. If that's what Kathleen Kennedy's agenda is. I understand that position. I really do. Some would say that I don't take these encroachments seriously enough, as if to say that I'm not seeing these signs and that I'm complicit by not speaking out about it. As a fan, of Star Wars. Now, I do see the political aspect of the so-called Lucasfilm Civil War. Now, so I understand this idea here. I'm not denying it. I get it. Now, if this were a fight over reality, then I'd be with you on it. But when this is all a fight over fiction, this is where I hesitate about making such a big deal of it myself. Now, in this light, when consumers, let me just speak generally here, when consumers have this much power over creators, so much so that the creators are at significant odds with each other, it really becomes a mob scene. And in general, artistic creativity is lost to what seems like a new wave commercialism, which is fueled by continuity issues and religious fervor to source material, unwavering source material. Not saying that things should be thrown out, because I've seen, like, Major Grin is a channel that pops up in my scrolling once in a while, and he kind of highlights how things have been changed in Picard that were in TNG. He kind of shows things back to back that are saying complete opposites of each other. So, I get it. But really, with all of the in the real world, with all of the statue toppling and virtue signaling and reset button pushing going on in this country, this whole erasing thing of a trilogy thing, it just seems like another case of angry mobs setting things aflame, demanding apologies and holding ransom properties that they don't own. Again, I do understand the political crusade aspect that older fans are railing against. That's what they take issue with of Kathleen Kennedy, against Kathleen Kennedy. And while I agree that Star Wars is a series, and while I agree that a possible Star Wars series, female-centric series written by Harvey Weinstein's former staff is a bad idea, I know that fans would be really hate to see Boba Fett messed with. If there's some sort of correlation between, like, her getting her own version of Mandalorian is what Overlord DVD was, supposing, kind of as he's unpacking things. I understand that all of that is, something to wince at. But ultimately, remember, Star Wars is fiction. And I find it ultimately a futile contest, not so worthy of merit. There are real things more worth fighting for. If this coup happens of, eliminating Kennedy's legacy here, all her work, if this coup happens, it will not just be a massive and kind of embarrassing retcon from kind of the outside, saying, like the we don't mention the odd-numbered Star Wars movies, or something like that, I don't know. But it would, or Star Trek movies, that's what it was. And we don't mention the odd-numbered Star Trek movies, but it'll be a massive upheaval of correlating stories which have contributed to episodes 9 through 7. Now, some will say good riddance, but remember, the same feelings when New Jedi Order came out, and again when the Legends designation was created. Novels, comics, TV shows, video games, Galaxy's Edge, all of these tie-ins for the last 5+ years will be equally as irrelevant, just as it was when the Legends was created. I loved Galaxy's Edge. If you erase 7, 8, and 9, Galaxy's Edge is halfway wiped out. Casual fans or outsiders may see all of this drama as the biggest sibling rivalry ever of nerds fighting on their make-believe worlds over whose Star Wars is better, and complaining about each other, saying, they ruined it. And we thought Sonic fans were hard to please. I'm a Sonic fan, so I can tease about that. Speaking of upheaval, Leia would have to be completely CGI now, or deep-faked and voice cast. Although I did see a deep-fake of somebody doing that on Rogue One. It looked really impressive. I forget who did it, but you've probably seen that before. And Carrie Fisher's last work and contribution, she contributed a bit to Last Jedi, I understand. Her last work and contribution will be rendered irrelevant. And really, would people have complained if Mary Poppins had never existed already? If we didn't have that idea in our mind, then couldn't we just take Leia at face value? How would they feel about it then? Or did people complain when Yoda gave his war cry in Ninja Spin fighting against Count Dooku in Attack of the Clones? If you didn't have these ideas in your head already, can't you just take them at face value for what it is? Plus, Harrison Ford. He wanted his character to have meaning, not just be in it, which is why he thought that Han Solo should have been dead in Return of the Jedi. He thought he'd served his purpose. So that's probably why he was happy that he finally got killed off in The Force Awakens. He wanted his characters to have meaning, not just to be in it. He doesn't just want to be there just to be a wall decoration. And if this change happens, this erasing happens, it will insult his decision to come back to Star Wars after having been having an infamously unfriendly relationship with Star Wars and with fans. He doesn't appreciate when fans only care about his work in Star Wars. You can see his eyes roll now. He's proud of all his work, and I'm not sure that Harrison Ford would want to come back again because some people didn't like Disney Star Wars. So, be careful what you wish for. Here's really my big drive here, my kind of big picture idea. Star Wars has essentially become a religion for people. Now, from a Christian perspective, not me, that's not what I mean, but because I'm a Christian. In Christianity, this kind of making a religion of it would be considered an idol, or Old English is graven image, is what it's called, which means something man-made that people worship and dedicate with their life, love, and resources. It could be Star Wars, it could be money, it could be sports, it could be whatever. Star Wars has become one of these things. Now, I enjoy Star Wars, but it's not my first love. It's not my religion. Now, because of this, that's why I'm not so critical of Star Wars trilogy, because Star Wars is not purely where my identity is. So I don't feel that my life is threatened because of the sequel trilogy. It's not threatened by Kathleen Kennedy. When many hands come into the pot of making Star Wars, meaning that the consumers are interfering and causing chaos with the makers, like this Lucasfilm Civil War, there will be a myriad of desires and wishes and tastes which will not suit all worshippers. I mean, if the mob gets their way, then will the mob be satisfied? Because you've got lots of voices in that mob, and they all have different ideas. Just consider fan fiction. Some fan fictions are a practice of technical skill, and it's a valuable learning experience, and good for them. But a lot of fan fiction is just rearrangements of canon, just to suit their personal taste. But ultimately, it's nothing original. The religion which claims to cater to everyone will satisfy no one. Now, I have greatly enjoyed, wrapping up here, I have greatly enjoyed Filoni and Favreau's efforts. Clone Wars, Solo. I liked Solo, although that's not really Filoni or Favreau's, but I enjoy these other ideas. Rogue One, I enjoyed that. Rebels, Mandalorian. And I look forward to more projects helmed by Filoni and Favreau. And the team that they've assembled, like Deborah Chow or Dallas Bryce Howard, these folks. And even I look forward to these things. And George Lucas has been brought on for inspiration and guidance. I'm looking forward to an Obi-Wan project as well, all these different things. I enjoy these stories in different genres that delve into deep aspects of Star Wars lore, or they ask questions, deep questions within our own souls to ponder and consider. Now, I thought that at face value, the sequel trilogy did this too. And what's sad to me about this angry fan reaction is that the people who made episode 7, 8, 9, the makers, the cameramen, the props guys, the costume makers, all of these people really enjoyed doing it because they love Star Wars. I even consider that Rian Johnson took his role seriously in trying to figure out what caused the circumstances of the sequel trilogy in the first place. You know, people complain that The Force Awakens was too much the same as A New Hope, and then they say The Last Jedi is way too different. But, you know, Rian Johnson was terrified about it. He was really scared about what he was proposing to do, but he felt that it was the right way to consider that whole setup that Luke had, which was not his fault. It was, Abrams and Kasdan who put him on that aisle. And, I mean, maybe it was Kennedy's idea, too, to not have Luke be the hero. I don't know. Probably what people are complaining about. But still, all of these people who have put their heart and soul into making these new Star Wars movies, imagine their heartbreak when they have given their love and their passion, their blood, sweat, and tears. And remember, Star Wars is often what has inspired all these people as creators and contributors to filmmaking. Imagine their heartbreak to have that labor of love be treated as the work of the devil himself. Or the devil herself, if that's what you think of Kathleen Kennedy. And that these people are what's wrong with Star Wars. Now, I thought that the great takeaway of the sequels was that it doesn't matter where you come from or who you are. It matters what you do. From a conservative standpoint, that's true. It doesn't matter who you are or where you come from. You have the ability to make your own choices. You have the ability to choose to not be at status quo, but to do something with your life. Even Gandalf says that. When you have an unhappy circumstance in life, Gandalf says, "So do all who live to see such times, but that's not for them to decide. All you have to decide is what to do with the time that's given to you." See, from a conservative standpoint, I believe that's true. So I thought that was the great takeaway of the sequels, is it doesn't matter where you come from or who you are. It matters what you do. And it's never too late to do the right thing, because your past doesn't always define your future. That's a real life lesson to be learned by those who keep drinking the mainstream media Kool-Aid. Now, I can temper my own reactions against Kennedy's reported politicizing of Star Wars by looking at the end result aspect of it and asking, is it still an enriching story with good lessons to be learned? I know that question is still under fierce debate. And I guess we'll have to see how all this plays out. But I have to say that in today's environment of temperamental people easily triggered over things that they don't actually have ownership of, this whole pushing the reset button on Star Wars again, with no foreseeable limit to what gets retconned in the future to appease more angry fans, if they happen. I just have to say, I get a bad feeling about this. May the Force be with us all.